I've been forgetting the vest, so figured I'd go ahead and wear the vest for this one. So, we have been building up to this for about, what is it? 2 seasons now? This is indeed the Blue Eyes Change the Future two-parter. I've actually got just over 2 pages of notes this time. Most of them is me basically bitching out the dub. So, for you dub haters out there, this one's for you. Meanwhile, don't expect me to not be complaining about specific things in the sub, although the sub is much better this time. It's just not as much of a gulf of difference between the sub and the dub as it was in, say, Friends to the End. Because in Friends to the End, it was literally just like... It was literally just like, yeah, no, this... because that 4-parter was absolute trash in the dub, but in the sub it was actually quite excellent. So cool, right? Sorry. Sorry, my Retro Fighters USB dongle was irritating me because it was reflecting off of the thing. You don't care. Anyways, but yeah, no, this one, this definitely was one of those things where it's just like, the dub changed so much of the dialogue that it was kind of crap. just to put that as simply as I can, because it all revolves around the difference between Kaiba and Seto, as I have described. So yeah, Kaiba's a dick in this episode, and is constantly saying, "I don't believe in shit." Meanwhile, Seto actually has good reasons for not buying into Ishizu's bullshit. So, but before we get to even the duel, let's talk about prediction powers, shall we? Prediction powers are not a good trope. I think we can definitively put our stamp on it and say, yeah, prediction powers, no, they don't. Don't bother with them, right? Now, the reason why is very, very simple. Because it's a fucking cliche. How many times has a prophecy been told? And if it's a heroic prophecy, as in this hero is destined to save the world, it happens exactly as predicted. And if it's something negative towards the characters, like in this episode, it fails. Always. Especially when it's powers, because usually when it's a prophecy, the prophecy will be fulfilled. But when it's just somebody predicting the future, I see the future, it always fails because the future is not immutable. Which is funny because I actually feel like this concept was actually done better on something like, say, Justice League Unlimited, right? Is the future immutable, right? Is it destiny that, Lex Luthor becomes the president of the United States, he's Superman and zaps him out of existence, and then Armageddon happens and the Justice Lords, and then instead of a Justice League, we have the Justice Lords again, right? That's what Justice League Unlimited tackled. That was the whole point of the Cadmus arc, after all. Was asking that question, the difference between morality and morality and all that. It's actually one of the reasons why that was so good, and why it was such a blessing that the DCAU, got Jeffrey Combs to play the question, because as well, Jeffrey Combs could deliver dialogue like, "Is the future immutable?" without it being hokey. So I'm gonna bitch about the dub for a bit, and then we'll shift gears and we'll talk about the sub, okay? So, yeah. I do like that in the sub, the translation of the hieratic text is more difficult. It's taking Kaiba's tech a lot longer than in the sub. It's only because in the dub, it's just the last line of text that can't be deciphered, but everything else is perfectly fine for Kaiba's tech apparently. What? Which is just I still say that Ishizu hiding her identity is frankly fucking stupid. Stupid. And then the dub pulls some crap like, they don't realize at first she's an Ishtar, and it's just like she said her name was Ishizu Ishtar. Put two and two together, guys. Come on. And that's only in the dub, by the way. In the sub, it's just like, oh, yeah, they have the same last name. They're siblings. Oh, okay. They're figuring it out. In other words. Also, you gotta love how American, the young American, in the dub gives away the whole game plan. There are limits to Ishizu's powers, which is funny because that's not actually the intent of the Japanese version. Although, yeah, apparently it can be countered by other Millennium items, but that's beside the point. So, what's funny is this: I had a few notes that were actually were notes for myself to pay attention to the sub. Specifically, Kaiba taking credit for Ishizu's bullcrap. For taking credit for the tournament, even though Ishizu's the one who pushed it. And the pep talk that Atem gives in part 2. Because in part 2, Atem in the dub tells him, says, to keep focused and all that, and encourages him. Whereas in the sub, Atem basically says the future is not immutable. So carve your own path to the future as a duelist, and that kind of reignites his inner flame. Now, even Seto has had problems with ego, and I have pointed them out as they are. This is not one of them. This is the start of what most people consider to be the actual, no really, sub Seto. He'll have a few moments later down the line where it's still fucking douchebag. It's still the fucking douchebag. But for the most part, in the sub, douchebag Kaiba is done. We're done with Seto Kaiba being a fucking asshole, basically. Now, he'll still have moments of, prideful arrogance, and I will point those out as we go. Clash in the Colosseum. I don't agree that that's a 10 being a dick. No. I'm gonna have to go over that. I'm gonna have to go over both languages' speeches with a fine-tooth comb when we get to Clash in the Colosseum, because I'm gonna have to talk about the whole thing of why I don't think it's pride on Atem's part, but it is pride on the factor of Seto. Because he is prideful. He is obnoxious. And to be honest with you, I kind of wish the Doma arc had actually been what interrupted Battle City instead of the Virtual World arc. Because if that had been the case, then Atem could go through a character arc, learn that anger and hatred and pride and all that shit are fallacies, and then he can come at Kaiba and say, anger and pride are going to destroy you. He learns that lesson. Then, after destroying Alcatraz Island, spoilers, then after destroying the monument to Gosaburo's bullshit, then Gosaburo returns, and then Seto can deal with that and bring an end to to finally dispose of the ghosts of his past. I think that would have worked better. Because what's funny is that one of the biggest problems I've heard in regards to the Virtual World arc is that it interrupts Battle City. And I actually agree with that. Now, I gotta be honest with you, I kind of would prefer the Doma arc not actually interrupt Battle City, I will admit, because of, everything else. But I feel like that actually just would have worked better. Or at the very least, kind of have Kaiba wrestling with the question, and then when we go through the Doma arc, kind of have a sort of, an anime-only rematch between the two, give us a final closure to the whole, if hatred is all that's in your heart, you will always lose kind of thing, and then and then have and then have and then kind of go from there, because then you can actually build upon all of this. Because spoilers, the Doma arc is not actually going to build upon this properly. Nobody's going to go through a character arc, and it's all going to be because as we have to railroad things into it. But a clever writer could actually still bring us through this character arc, have one final battle between Yugi and Kaiba, a final battle of answering the question of the road to battle, and then blah, blah, blah. And then Millennium World can happen, and then voila. You have Seto go through all of those events. He learns a bit more about his ancient past, but still stands firm on the fact that he is not going to be tied down by the past, nor is he going to be afraid of the future. He will craft the future, which is the whole point of Seto's dialogue in the sub in this episode. Sense make? So that's all good. So one last funny little thing I need to bring up before we really get into it. Two things that are said in the dub that I want to bring up here. The first is there's a point where Kaiba says in the dub, Kaiba says to Ishizu, I lost all patience while I was waiting for you to show up. By the way, never brought up in the sub. Seto never bitches about how long Ishizu took to come to the dueling arena. That's all in the dub. Now, granted, Seto is a bit of a prick by saying, I will give you a chance to surrender if you want, because again, you had the balls to show up, cool, but clearly you're scared of me, so, if you want to surrender, I won't say shit. Of course, Ishizu doesn't surrender, because otherwise we wouldn't have an episode then, but there you go. But yeah, in the dub, it was like Kaiba was like, I lost all patience for blah 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 blah, and Merrick is even like, yeah, I'm kind of getting sick of her myself. And I wrote down, I wrote down in my notes here, I also have no patience for you. Who? Speaking to Ishizu. I also have no patience for you. Oh great! Look at what you made me do. Who? I'm agreeing with Merrick and Kaiba. Bitch. Because which barring any opinions you may have of Abridgers, Dragon Ball Z Abridged is funny. I don't care what your opinion of Team 4 Stars people are, okay? I really don't. Sorry, a little bitter because because of a stream I saw of Steve that just made me go, yeah, no. Certain someone's not going to be in the sequel series. Anyways, I do find it interesting that the flashbacks kill the pace in the sub rather than in the dub, admittedly. Although there is more senseless gloating in the there. Oh, right, the second thing I was going to talk about. So in the dub, Kaiba says that Duel Monsters isn't about, predictions and all this other shit. It's about skills and power. Right? And I admit he's not wrong. You basically just add asshole strategies to the mix, and there you go. And that's always been a thing. The crush card combo, the both anime and real life, fucking all of the fucking lockdown strategies that are employed now. The fucking basically you have to pop off for get fucked, which is just I don't like modern Yu-Gi-Oh, which is something we're gonna have to talk about. I'll be talking about more when we get up to Vrains, which will be way down the line, admittedly. But man, oh man, am I going to be talking quite a bit about how Vrains basically had an uphill battle because Vrains was, where we got to modern Yu-Gi-Oh, basically. And so it was kind of, that thing of I had to, you know, I where I'm going to be complaining about how much I just do not like the game nowadays. It's gotten to the it's literally gotten to the point, which was funny because it actually has been this way for about a decade now, over a decade actually, roughly a decade and a half, I would actually argue, where the game pretty much has been with the exception of 1 year, which was 2016, one format where the game was play one of like three decks or go home because you're not competing in no tournaments. And that's why 2016 was so good because I mean again there was like 6 or 7 decks I want to say that was in the top. Yeah, blue the world championship match was a Blue Eyes Mirror match, but cue the joke from Dan Green. At least someone won with Blue Eyes today, eh, Kaiba? And I just love that Eric Stewart just looks at Dan Green with a look of you motherfucker. Hooker with that. That was good. I I don't always enjoy the scripted stuff in when with the World Championships, but sometimes it's fun. But yeah. Uh but yeah. So yeah. And then in part two, at the end of it, Kaiba's just like, yeah, he's not ever gonna believe in magic. Because Ishizu's like, oh, maybe he'll start believing in magic and all that. No. No, he really won't. He really, really won't ever. And that kind of makes me sad. Okay. I think I am done bitching about the dub. Let's move on to the sub now. So, I'm actually going to do something. I'm actually going to go ahead and talk about the duel first because I have very little to say about the duel, with like three big exceptions. However, I am going to leave the final move. I'm going to leave the final move out of the discussion because there's 2 points I want to bring up in regards to the duel proper in terms of plot. One is a plot hole with Blast with a Tribute because the way they explain it literally makes no sense unless you make a presumption. And two, who is of course, what the plot hole, what it leads to, right? So, let's talk about so let's start with Shizuka's speech being better. Shizuka basically talks about how she wants her Joey and the others to go and watch Kaiba duel because so that they can be ready for whatever's coming in the next round. I kind of like that, and she even kind of encourages them, even thanking them, with the exception of Yugi. I could make a joke about that, but I'm not going to. No reason to get Anzu angry at me, after all. Which is funny which is funny, honey, because Seto literally says that he likes Ishizu better than he did last time, which is just funny to me. So then, yeah, part one, literally right from the beginning, has Seto earn the sub its point. Its point for part one, which is funny because a lot of it's basically Seto that's the reason for the sub getting the 2 points this week. By the way, just to lay that out for you, because Seto actually is actually a character this week instead of an inconsistent asshat. And from what I know of the next 3 seasons, this is how he will remain. So there's that. I also like the fact that not only does he acknowledge that Seto acknowledges that Ishizu was the one who set this whole thing up by making that request of him to go defeat the ghouls, but I also like the fact that him being used is a better reason than just his hatred of occult shit. I don't believe in your hocus pocus mamby pamby bullshit, and that's why I hate you. No, I prefer the idea of I don't like being used. Because, again, Seto likes to carve his own path, right? He doesn't like having the path laid out before him. He likes to carve his own path. Like a certain emperor that I could name. Yeah. Anywho. So they bring up the fact that it's funny because in the dub they actually mention Esperoba for the whole this feels like Esperoba, but no, Joey actually brings up my aroma strategy for the whole playing cards without looking at them thing, which is kind of cool. I don't like the inner monologue between Ishizu and Merrick, as that just annoys me because it's like what? But in both versions, I will say. I also like the fact that she says there will be consequences for her actions in this, specifically in terms of using her powers during this duel. There's not even close. I also like that you can actually see Seto sweating. That's actually kind of nice. And also I really like two of the lines he actually ends the duel with. Because Seto talks about believing in something beyond God, and that's how he managed to, overcome fate. And I also love the final line he says to Ishizu: "If you succumb to the future, there is no light." Absolutely love that frickin' line, which is kind of hilarious because it was a light attribute monster that saved his ass, right? Alright, so let's get into the duel proper, because I do have some cards to talk about before we get into the 2 big talking points of the duel. So, Vorse Raider makes his debut, which I gotta say, Vorse Raider was always one of my favorites. Also, I love his evolved form, Kaiser Vorse Raider. Frickin' love that thing. Then there's Drag Down to the Grave, which plays more like hand destruction, which is hilarious. For those that not in the know, Drag Down into the Grave in the real game only lets you select 1 card from your opponent's hand to send to the graveyard, whereas hand destruction is 2. Actually, I think hand destruction, the player discarding chooses which cards they discard, but I could be wrong about that. So then Shrink, because Vorse Raider is a dark monster, Kaiba uses Shrink and Crush card to destroy Ishizu's deck. Of course, this isn't Season 1 Crush card virus, so those monsters can actually be monster reborn. Hence why he sent away Spell Reproduction and Monster Reborn, which is kind of funny in hindsight. And then Death's Feral Imp shows up, called Dark Gremlin here for some reason. Okay. And then Virus Cannon actually has an animation fail in the dub because, for those not in the know, Virus Cannon is supposed to be a spell card in the Japanese version. But because it's a trap card in the real game, they made it a trap card in the dub, which creates a mini plot hole, which is negated because of Muko and whatever. Anywho, so there's that. Oh, it's over on this page. So yeah, so then Null and Void is used and yada yada yada. After Ishizu hits him with Exchange of the Spirit. Now, Exchange of the Spirit is a card that swaps the decks and the graveyards. So any cards you have, any cards a player has in their graveyard becomes their deck, and their deck becomes their graveyard. Right? It's literally a flipping around of the graveyard and the deck. Very devastatingly powerful, and you can see why this thing was errated so many goddamn times to the form it is now. Because originally you could just activate it whenever. Then you had to have 1,500 or more, 1,500, 15 or more cards in your graveyard. And the errata form that is in now requires both players to have at least 15 cards in their graveyard or to activate it. In other words, to prevent exactly the kind of bullshit that happens in this episode. Oh, hey, here you only have 6 cards left in your deck. Oh, hey, I flip over Needleworm and send 5 of those to the graveyard. You draw 1 card, you don't finish me off. Oh, look, I just end my turn and you lose to deck out. Yeah, you can see why this thing got banned and errated hard. You know? Then there's Null and Void, which actually, which is pretty damn powerful. It's called Muko in the anime. Took forever to come out, if I remember correctly, too. So Kaiba is completely backed into a corner, which means he has to use Soul Exchange and summon out Obelisk. But unfortunately for Obelisk, well, the two plot points I want to talk about started happening, namely Blast with a Tribute and, well, the moment, which we'll talk about in a second. The first thing I want to talk about right off the bat here is, what the hell? Hang on. Whoops. I need to check this. Sorry, work-related thing. I will, of course, edit that out as ever. But anyways, where was I? Right. So, Blast with a Tribute. Now, the way Ishizu explains it is the trap card went into Zolga. Zolga was sacrificed for Obelisk, and now Obelisk has the bomb inside of him. Okay. Why does Blue Eyes not have the bomb? Now, I know what you're saying, but Blue Eyes has to not have the bomb in order for Kaiba to win. Yeah, but the way it's explained, shouldn't it transfer to Blue Eyes? Or is it only a one-time thing? You see why I say this is a plot hole? Unless we headcanon that it only works once. So once Kaiba sacked Obelisk for Blue Eyes, that was it. The bomb actually went to the graveyard finally. I suppose that makes sense, but at the same time, it's like no line of dialogue flicks that, right? Speaks to that. It's not a one. Ishizu doesn't think to herself, "He destroyed my one-time bomb. He changed the future." Nothing like that. Instead, Blue Eyes just shows up, blasts her, and that's the end of it. But why does Blue Eyes show up? Well, That is where a combination of the Millennium Rod activating and a combination of the Millennium Rod activating, hitting, and Seto having a vision. Now, of course, he's all grumpy about it in the dub. Kaiba is grumpy about it because, of course. But in the sub, he's more just confused. Why am I having this vision? What is this feeling? What is this sadness I am seeing of seeing my ancient Egyptian self holding his dead girlfriend in front of the Blue Eyes tablet? Like, what? And what was with Blue Eyes on the tablet? But Blue Eyes, what the hell are you trying to tell me? Fuck it. I'm just gonna believe in that vision. Silent Doom. I activate Silent Doom. What? I didn't see Silent Doom coming in my vision. Gadget Soldier. Revive. Now I need 2 sacrifices in order to call to call Blue Eyes. And I'll start with this one. What? You don't mean? Yep. I'm sacrificing God. Obelisk, Gadget Soldier, get the hell out of here. Here, my pride and my soul are now showing up. Which is funny because 3 separate rival characters are gonna call one of their boss monsters their soul. The first, of course, is here with Kaiba. The second will be the Master of Faster, and the third will be the Master of the Galaxy, of the eyes that see the galaxy. But we'll get to that. We'll get to those awesome monsters when we get there. Especially the Zale one. I'm really looking forward to talking about that. Like I said, I haven't seen Zale all the way through, but I have seen specific scenes, and that is one of them. The big summoning where he throws a frickin' javelin of light up. And I don't mean those stupid nukes from Fire Emblem Three Houses, but I'm getting way off track. So he sacks them both. I love that God's anger is playing. Hey, Blue Eyes stole the God cards. It's music. I'm okay with that, by the way. I actually like that, because if there's any monster that should be stealing the Egyptian god card's music, it's Blue Eyes. Let's just be real about that, you know? But I digress. So Blue Eyes changes the future. Kaiba has dumb lines about how he's not going to believe in magic, and Seto has awesome lines about not being afraid of the future. Epic. Sub gets 2 points. This was actually a good episode in the sub. This is the first time we've actually had, in my opinion, an episode that was... Well, no, I'm wrong. Sorry. Second time we've had an episode that has been absolutely the kind of dreck in the dub, but in the sub, mwah, beautiful. I wonder if that's a trend that will continue. Next week I gotta talk about Merrick. Great! Because next week is the Ishtar backstory episode. See you next week, guys. Blue Wolf Alex of the Lore Walkers signing out. Have a good one. Duel standby.